In this video, we're going to talk about competitive markets and efficiency. And after you complete this video, you should be able to define an efficient market and explain why and when perfectly competitive markets generate efficient outcomes. So to help us with our definition of efficiency, let's review our concept of consumer surplus. And what I have here is I have a demand curve for what could be any good in the world. And as we recall before, demand is equal to marginal private benefits. So any point along this demand curve represents the marginal private benefit that a consumer receives from consuming that quantity of a good. So if we look here at a quantity of QC1, consumers receive a marginal private benefit of P1. Now, consumers value or have higher marginal private benefits for these fewer units of goods here, but our consumers only have to pay price P1 for all units consumed. So we can represent our consumer surplus as the difference between marginal private benefit and the price actually paid. And so if we fill in this whole area right here, we can find total consumer surplus if consumers pay price P1 for all units consumed. So let's clean that up and take a look. And remind ourselves that consumer surplus is equal to the area under the demand curve or the marginal private benefit curve and above the price paid. Now let's recall our calculation of producer surplus. Now the supply curve is the sum of all of the marginal cost curves of all of the firms in this market. And so we can say that our supply curve also represents marginal private cost. At a price of P1, firms are willing and able to bring QC1 units of this good to market. Now, had the price been lower, down here, firms would have been willing and able to bring a lower quantity of this good to market. However, firms get to collect price P1 for all of the units sold. So producer surplus is the difference between the price collected and the price required to bring that quantity to market. So total producer surplus in this market, we can represent as the area below the market price and above the supply or the marginal private cost curve. So let's clean that up and take a look. So marginal cost at QC1 units of output is equal to P1. Our producer surplus is the area above the market price or below the market price and above the supply curve. So let's put these two together. All right, so here's total surplus. Total surplus is consumer surplus plus producer surplus. Economists actually don't care too much about whether it's consumers or producers that receive surplus. What economists care about is the sum or total surplus. And economists call a market efficient if total surplus is maximized. And a market efficiency or efficiency occurs at the point where marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost, and that's our equilibrium outcome. This picture here represents an efficient market outcome. So what we're going to do in the next slides is just show that there isn't another price that we could choose that would make this total surplus any bigger than it is right here. Let's try. Let's pick a high price. Let's suppose the price of this good is up here at P high. If the price is up here at P high, consumers are willing and able to purchase QC prime units of this good. Firms would like to sell consumers more, something out here, right? But we can't make consumers buy these units, so only QC prime units are sold. We can find our consumer surplus as the area under demand or marginal private benefit and below the price, and our producer surplus as the area above the supply curve and below the price. And what I've shaded in here is total surplus. And I also want to draw your attention to the fact that marginal private benefit is up here at P high, but marginal private cost is lower. That suggests that the marginal benefit to consuming the next unit for consumers would be greater than it would cost producers to make that unit, suggesting that we could have an increase in total welfare or total surplus if we were able to reduce the price and increase quantity. So cleaning up and taking a look here, we see marginal private benefit exceeds marginal private cost. We've gained some producer surplus at the expense of consumer surplus, but our total surplus is less than it would be at our equilibrium outcome. So any price that's higher than our market equilibrium would result in less total surplus. All right, let's try it again. Let's give us a low price. Now down here at P low, consumers would like to buy this many units. However, producers are only willing and able to sell QC prime units. So we can't make producers supply units that consumers may want, so only QC prime units get sold. We notice here that at the quantity QC prime, marginal private benefit exceeds marginal private cost. Our consumer surplus, the area below the demand curve and above the price, is this area right here. Our consumers may be happier because prices are lower, but our producer surplus is significantly smaller here. So let's clean this up. Take a look. We've got marginal private benefit exceeds marginal private cost. We've gained some consumer surplus at the expense of producer surplus, and our total is less than it would be at our market equilibrium. So if we were to be where marginal private benefit equals marginal private cost, total surplus would be greater. So our market in this case is inefficient at any price that's lower than equilibrium. So we weren't able to get any surplus at high prices. We weren't able to get any additional surplus at low prices. The best we can do is market equilibrium. So total surplus is maximized at equilibrium price and quantity. At this value here, marginal benefit is equal to marginal cost. Market equilibrium is efficient. And often that's the case. So when do we see inefficiencies? We will find inefficiencies or total surplus being less than the maximum in the case where firms have some kind of market or pricing power, like in the case of monopoly. We will also show that total surplus is less than maximum or markets are inefficient in the case where we have price distortions like taxes, tariffs, price ceilings, and price floors. Now, if we were to stop there and the class was over, you would think that perfectly competitive markets are perfect and always maximize total surplus. But unfortunately, markets sometimes fail. And so what we'll cover later on is the cases of market failure, when we have an externality or the markets for public goods and common resources.